Hi, everyone. Hopefully, maybe I won't speak too loudly so you can sleep after the heavy lunch, but please don't snore. APIs to enable the Internet of Everything. It sounds like a pretty bold statement. So today, I think you've probably been beaten into submission about the importance of APIs, I hope. That's all we've heard about in terms of business justification for APIs, why it makes sense, and I think we're all believers. And so rather than just hammering on that point, I'd like to kind of talk about why APIs should be done in a smart way, trying to build intelligent APIs that actually get used. There's been a lot of conversations about, if you build it, will they come? So a lot of my focus is really trying to talk about the kind of API you provide. And within the commerce world, we have customers like Google and Pearson and Symantec and Time Inc. and Virgin Media, kind of a lot of large brands, and they're really focused on establishing a strong relationship with their consumers. They're really about managing the digital experience, and we're all experiencing that through different devices these days. So you hear a lot about machine to machine, the Internet of Things, the Internet of Everything. And an API obviously will really drive the ability for components to talk to other components, for people to talk to the technologies in different ways. We all have many different devices, and there's going to be an explosion of new devices as you get into Google Glass, into watches, into many different devices, wearable devices. The API is going to be even more important than ever. So what I'd like to kind of talk about over the next 25 minutes or so is kind of a quick view of what the analyst perspective is on this market. And it's hard to actually see sometimes analysts get excited about certain things. So it's actually good to get a view from Forrester and Gartner in terms of what they think an API can do. So we talked a lot about kind of that business innovation that occurs, and I'll talk a bit about that as well. But we hear a lot about cloud first, mobile first, and we kind of talk about API first, just to kind of go along the same theme. And about 3 years ago, Elastic Path realized that the world of e-commerce was changing. People aren't always going to their web storefront. They're not logging in on a computer always. They're interacting over the web through different devices, through apps running on their mobile devices. So we took an approach of API first. And to the point, we actually said we ripped the head off of our technology stack. So instead of having a well-defined user interface structured on top of the underlying technology stack, we pulled that off, recognizing that the stack, the product, is going to be driven by APIs. In some cases, that will be a content management system that drives the user experience. In a lot of cases, it's going to be the devices. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So APIs, again, you probably believe already that otherwise you wouldn't be in this audience, that they are important. I'm not here to tell you it's a fad, it's going to go away. APIs are things we've been doing for many, many years. And so a lot of people should say, why is this so different? APIs have been around forever. Everyone has produced a product, has developed an API around their product to enable access. And we think technologies have come a long way. You hear a lot about technologies like SOAP or REST or JSON, and you hear people say, give SOAP at REST, because REST is really becoming the preferred method of actually defining these APIs. And we believe that at Elastic Path. We actually defined an API based on REST, but what's called a level 3 REST. If you look in the market, there's something called the Richardson maturity model, and they really define different sophistication levels within REST. And so we produced what we think is a leading edge REST API. We call it Cortex, and Cortex really is, we think, the silver bullet. This kind of API mechanism, and the reason it is because the users of the API don't need to understand all the complexities of the underlying system. That's been the problem with APIs. I was talking to someone last night, they were talking about the 5 megabyte WSDL. So in the world of web services, you have web services definition language. And so when one component talks to another component, it has to wrap up all this information into the payload of the communication. And it's typically described in using this WSDL. And often you'd have this component talking to that component, sending over all this data. And it just made it really difficult to work with. So the power of REST is to simplify. And the reason we feel like we're now at the point where APIs can really get used is something like REST really allows you to define what I call the noun of businesses. So REST, rather than call a service that says, put that object in the cart, you can just refer to cart. You can refer to product. It's more the nouns versus the verbs. And the nice thing about REST, it kind of lets you, within your application, be able to refer to these nouns, and essentially what comes back to you is a very, very complicated result set with all the stuff put into it that you would need to do. So the point is, if I'm building on a JavaScript application, all I have to do is refer to these nouns. I get back a very, what we call, highly decorated object with all of the appropriate links. In the commerce world, if I'm adding something to a the product to the catalog, then if it's a digital product, if I'm buying a video, then the video is not going to have shipping details if it's an online video. So what comes back to me is a result set that understands the context of which I'm calling that API from. So again, all that's done in the background. So I think the technologies we have today to develop these APIs have really come a long way, and it's making it easier to consume. And so we talk a lot about the consumption layer. So, and we think that consumption layer is going to get much more complicated. They're going to get a lot more devices, new devices coming on the scene constantly. So you can't be building a special app for every device. Sometimes you have to go to lowest common denominator. Sometimes you need kind of an HTML5 type of application. Sometimes you need something that just runs more easily across all those devices. So with all that said, we're seeing a lot of support and seeing companies like Mashery and Apogee and SOA Software and Layer 7 and all these companies have been building, for years, have been building what's called SOA governance, Service-Oriented Architecture Governance. And it's all about, as an architect, we develop solutions that are loosely coupled. They're componentized. So when you need to assemble an application, you can take components, put it together in a different way, and you have to manage all that. So a lot of these API companies, like Mashery and others, have come out of that world as SOA. And these are all great concepts architecturally. You need loosely coupled, well-defined systems that have clear system boundaries, clear points of communication between them. So we think the time is right. And now APIs have become mainstream. And people recognize the need for this. They recognize it's not just a technology, but it's also a business. It's like opening the doors of your business. And you want people to come in. You want to build an ecosystem around your business. But of course, you need to do it in a controlled way. You're not just going to open up your doors. You need solutions like Mashery and other API gateway solutions to help you manage people coming in and using your API and getting data. So we put out a survey through Forrester trying to talk about the importance of APIs and going to CIOs and asking them. So we actually include a link at the end of the presentation. You can download the whole report. But as we've been saying, it's all about the fact that everyone understands the need for a unified API. Everyone sees the benefits of that. So I'm not going to belabor that. I think we, again, all day have been hearing this. So, but I suggest take a look at the report. There's some very interesting perspective on that. So kind of what are the key enablers for the API? What do you get from that? Again, a lot of this has been discussed, but it's really around fostering innovation, and I should say internal and external innovation. So what we see is customers like Symantec and Time and others, Pearson here in New York, are building a platform for the unexpected. They don't know how people are going to use that platform. So they're not going to go to the market with a platform with a defined user interface and a defined set of APIs that do very specific things only. They really recognize that a lot of innovation is going to occur outside the box, outside of the platform. And so most of the customers we've been working with that have this API-first approach want to build a platform that they want to put it out there and see what people do with it, how they innovate, how they try different things, how they fail fast. Put something out there. If it's not going to work, fail quickly, do something else, and refine that. So we really believe a proper API, not just any API, will really enable that kind of innovation. And I talked about decoupling. Having loosely coupled solutions is very key. So having APIs that allow components to talk to each other, as well as end-user applications to talk to the systems, is very important. So again, when you have a layered approach, loosely coupled approach, it just makes it much easier to manage the overall applications. So again, most of these, I think you kind of understand the need to future-proof. We need to be able to move very quickly. The state of technology is moving. Look at what happened in the last 10 years. The next 10 years, it's going to be much faster. As new devices come to market, as the interconnectedness of all of us. We're all connected in different ways. And our suit jackets are going to have built-in devices. We're going to have things in our glasses. We're going to have things probably under our skin at some point soon. All the technology is there. So we have to be ready for those kind of changes and be able to really kind of benefit from that. So let's look at how Forrester kind of looks at this. And again, this is in the context of commerce. It's just one example. You're probably in a very different line of business. But for commerce, you typically have different kind of back-end systems like product catalog management, customer experience management solutions, order management. You have a lot of these back-end systems. So normally what you get is, I don't know if I have a pointer on this. You normally have a storefront of some kind that really offers up to the user a set of products or things that you're selling, content, services, just like we're all shopping online. All that kind of gets fed from these back-end systems and delivered out. So normally the API has been built in a way that's a very discrete functionality that from the back-end system is exposed, is manifested out to the consumption layer so that people can build end-user applications. And what most people recognize the need for is that storefront. Somewhere where people log into your, go to the URL, they log in potentially, they look at your products, they buy something, they put it in a shopping cart, those kinds of things. Again, we decided to pull the head off of this thing and build a platform that was API-driven. And now you can use systems like Adobe CQ5, OpenText, content management systems to manage the user interface and all the user touchpoints. Because again, those touchpoints, it's not just about taking web content like an HTML5 and pushing it out into different devices. It's all about building native applications in a lot of cases that can reach back into the system and drive a process. Add stuff into the cart, drive it through the order management system, give order information, all those kinds of things. But these APIs, when they're delivered like this, can be very complicated. Again, it's taking a lot of complexity underneath the surface of this application and really requiring that the end user application, so as you're building an app, you need to figure out how to wire all these things together. And we think that's difficult to do, which is why we've kind of focused more on an intelligent API that we call basically a facade across that technology stack that really interacts with the end user's application and understands the context of what they're doing. Again, I mentioned the shipping information may not make sense for the kind of product, so it's very context-relevant API that adapts to the need of the user. So we, again, feel it's time for more intelligent APIs and not just putting this REST technology across your platform and then waiting for people to come. You have to build APIs that know how to respond and adapt to the environment in which they're being used in. Again, that environment, that consumption service environment is going to change dramatically. So you want to be able to foster innovation and fast change, and so your API needs to kind of keep up. So Gartner has an interesting model they call the pace layering model. And we don't want to spend too much time on this, but really they talk about some systems are like ERP systems and things like that are things you don't change very often. You're going to put an SAP system in or an Oracle system. Hopefully you're not changing that every 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, they're painful as it is to get in place. So your system of record kinds of systems are really going to be put in place and probably change out every maybe 5, 6, 7 years, really depending. So we think there's a slow pace of change within the systems of record. Your enterprise resource planning, your master data management, certain systems that are the bedrock of your application. And then you're going to have systems of differentiation. And again, we like this model where they separate out different layers within the application operate or need to change at a different pace. That's what the pace layering model is all about. And really where this goes is we think the systems of innovation is really where the focus needs to be. So the things that are going to make you look different to your consumers, that's where you should be able to rapidly innovate and be able to put something out there quickly and let people try it. Again, we've done a bunch of hackathons at Elastic Path with our customers as well, and we're now building into things like Google Glass, where I can walk into a store, I can open up a magazine, see an article, and I can purchase through this Google Glass, calling back into the API, again, having that context-relevant API. You're reading a magazine on your iPad, and you're looking at something, and there's an advertisement. Being able to click through and add it to your wish list. You're watching a video. You see somebody's got a cool watch. You go, wow, that's a neat watch. Being able to kind of tag that, maybe on a second screen device. I'm watching that. I'm interacting with my friends maybe about this as well. I see something on TV. It's annotated in a way where I can kind of click through it on my second device and be able to get more information. Again, another experience that reaches into the commerce platform, into the application platform, and drives a business process. So we think that's the area that becomes very interesting. This is where, when new devices come on the market, you can move fast. And so it comes back to this, a few people have been talking about the need for speed. And this is the need for being able to quickly build an application, try it, Make sure that it does what it needs to do, and refining, constantly refining it. Or like I said before, fail fast. The last thing you want to do is put something out there, put huge amounts of money into it, and then 12 months later realize it's not working. So the other thing about these APIs is they need to be highly instrumented. You need to be able to test. So when you put an application out there, within our API, within our Cortex API, everything that flows through the API is being captured. It's kind of like we have a big data database. We capture all the events, and we process that over time, and we learn the user behaviors. That's one thing that's different now is these APIs need to be a very rich source of information. You start to learn how your end consumers are interacting with the system. And in our solution, of course, it's about trying to monetize the transaction. It's about getting them to put something in the shopping cart and buying it. But we're more focused in on what we call customer lifetime value. It's not about the average order value. It's not just about shove as much as you can into their shopping cart and get them out the door. Because you're not building a good relationship with that consumer, potentially. You want to give them the right things at the right time. You want to understand. You want to learn about their behaviors. You want to personalize the experience. So for us, the API needs to support that digital experience, that customer lifetime value. All of you, as you're building out your API strategies, need to think about that. You need to think about, how does my API support digital relationship management, as we call it sometimes, or digital experience management? Okay, so again, it comes back to the kind of API you need to build. Again, more information on the survey about the fact that all APIs are not created equally. And I think this is the key message in my talk here is, it's not just about putting a nice, pretty layer around your application and saying, okay, go build apps. Go to the community and try to foster that innovation. It really is about building a proper API, using solutions like Mashery where you have a good developer interface, developer portal to your APIs. You can help support the use of your API. When you're operating your API, to be able to use API gateway solutions from Intel and other places that allow you to throttle back the use of the API. Maybe you don't want one consumer hammering away at the API. Maybe you want to set thresholds. Maybe you want to meter the usage. There's all that kind of control around the API. The nice thing is the API itself doesn't need to do that. You can have this control mechanism, this harness around the API that can open and close the doors, can really monitor, can get analytics about the usage of that API. Again, you start to learn, the API starts to learn and gathers information. In the world I came from, business intelligence, it's all about taking data and extracting information, transforming it into insights, and to allow you to operationalize that. So once you get that, it's not just about putting up a pretty dashboard, it's about learning and driving that back into the system. So it's a closed loop process. Again, the API is an enabler for that. So traditionally you have this kind of big monolithic stack, and as I mentioned before, you normally have a head on it in terms of a user interface. And a lot of what we're talking about is taking that head off, and again, kind of gruesome having a headless stack, but that's really where we need to go, is in this API-first model. But in a monolithic platform, you have legacy systems. Typically, all the presentation stuff is done kind of more server-based, and it kind of pushes out this web front end, or sometimes green screen front end. And again, we just feel like that's not going to give you the kind of innovation you need. So a lot of people try to go to the next step and try to take some of that business logic and move it to the client side and allow you to do much more rich internet applications, much more thick client kinds of applications. But again, now you're moving some of that complexity to the end user application. So when you're an application developer and you need to build on this thing, you need to figure out how to wire all this together. And that can be very difficult. So again, our focus is really about trying to go to that next level. Oops. And it is about an API layer. In our situation, it's called Cortex. You don't have to do the same thing, but we feel like there has to be an interesting layer that really, it disintermediates a little bit of complexity from the end user application. So from we have developers now that are just JavaScript developers. They're not really good strong, Java developers or Python or different, or Lisp, as we heard earlier. They just know how to kind of put together web pages, CSS3 and HTML5 and those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of business developers. If you enable them, all kinds of amazing things can happen. And when you have an API layer that's that business, that noun, the nouns of business, then at a JavaScript level, I can refer to things that are in my domain. I understand what a cart is. I understand what a magazine is, what a subscription is, and those kinds of things. It's amazing. We're starting to sit down somebody in front of Cortex, give them half an hour of kind of education, and let them go. It's amazing what people are able to do. We're having students build the textbook of the future, doing projects with Pearson and Desire to Learn and some of our other customers. We're also now, the user has this immersive experience where they can go in and interact with the system. It's amazing. You start to enable very new experiences. We have hackathons that interface to Xbox Connect and all these things, and the Minority Report where you can kind of start to visualize information in front of you and move stuff around. It's all here. The technology is here. It's just a matter of assembling it all together. So, to summarize, again, I'm hammering on the point of a properly architected API. Really will enable this. It's not just about putting an API out there and thinking you're done and putting something like Mashery around it. You really need to think about how that API is going to get used, how it's going to get consumed, and understand the many devices that it can get used in. So there's lots of different ways to do it. We use this level 3 REST hypermedia controls. It's a very kind of advanced usage of REST. And we think right now it's state-of-the-art kind of approach, not just for what we're doing, but what other people are doing in the community. Now, pace layering is an important topic as well. Sometimes you have APIs that are just for intercommunication between components, and that may not need to be quite as intelligent. It might be okay to call a SOAP interface on another system. That might be fine. So again, just to kind of wrap it all up, we think that the business innovation that can kind of occur with the right kind of API really is going to change the way you interact with your end users. You all have different kinds of end users, different consumers. It's enabling a lot of enterprises to go direct to consumer, not just to sell them things, but to provide a service rather than having to go through disintermediate channels to be able to interact directly. So a lot of what we're trying to do is enable these complex systems in a way that kind of fosters that type of community. And as I mentioned, the report, you can find it here, and I think the presentations will be available, so it'll be easy to get the link afterwards. So that's it.